What's going on, Nick? How you doing? I feel like I've never actually
I'm
called you Nick
okay.
before. You just call you like Bergs or Alberga. I don't know. It felt weird.
Well, it's the same thing with you, right? Like when you do hits, like do you go by Mike? Do you go by Al's brother? Somewhere in between? Is there a nickname we don't know about?
No. There's no Nick in the name. But honestly, whatever the host typically goes with is what I'll go with. Like it is whatever people want to go with, I suppose. Mike works. Al's brother also works. I'm well aware of the gravity that nickname, I guess, has given me and the weight that it has, and especially the sports and hockey world. So Al's brother works. Mike works. Whatever you want to go with.
I could only wonder and think about your Italian relatives being Al's brother. What is this? Like, do they ask you that? Like, do you
Always, man. Always. All my aunts and uncles always being like,
with
what's
the
the Al's
hands?
brother all about? Like, who's Al? Like, your brother's name's Christian. Do they know that? Yes, they know. It has nothing to do with it. Like, I still get texts like from people from high school who may not be big sports fans, but they'll be at the bar at like a Boston Pizza or something, and they'll snap a pic if I'm on Overdrive and be like, "Oh my God, is this you? Like, why does it say Al's brother?" And then I have to explain. Oh, it's a character name essentially. It's a nickname, but yes, that is I. And yeah, so I still get those messages to this day.
I haven't been shy on social media, as you know. Big fan of the station, big fan of your work, big fan of ODog, and we had Hayes on last week. I think Noodles is coming up in the next couple weeks, but I love that
Nice.
element of the show. It's like a campfire conversation. You never know what's going to come out of anybody's mouth, and I like that they have like nicknames for everybody. Man, it's like hilarious. I don't know anybody's name behind the scenes, but I think it actually adds to the persona, doesn't it?
No, it totally does, and it goes to show how much fun we have on the show, right? Like, if you're not taking your name seriously, like, I mean, doesn't that just show it basically? Like, no one's that serious, and we just have a lot of fun on the show. And I mean, I guess we could probably blame Odog for that. He's the guy who likes to hand out all the nicknames. There's a guy who used to work here. He used to say, you have your given name by your parents, and then you have the name that you're given by Odog, and those are the two names that typically will stick with you, especially professionally. And obviously, that's been the case with me and Hazy B and the Grappler. Like all of those can be attributed to the O Dog himself.
Yeah, and I don't know O very well, but he strikes me as a guy, if he's given you a nickname, it means he really respects you and really, really likes you. So I think that's a positive thing. You guys continue to bang out fantastic stuff. I will ask you about your Super Bowl pick, but let's jump into the Leafs conversation. I know you're tight for time here with Leafs Lunch coming up in about 45 or so. So at the bye week here, the All-Star break, your just general feelings on this team as we move closer and closer to the trade deadline.
Yeah, like I feel pretty good about this team from the perspective. I mean, they're what, fourth, fifth in the league in terms of points percentage. Actually, I think they probably jumped up to fourth with Tampa coming out of the break, hitting a little speed bump. And like, how can you not be happy with that? Especially when you look at the fact that Austin Matthews still hasn't looked like the Austin Matthews that we expect from him. I think when he comes back from his injury, he should be rested and ready to go and go on a tear down the stretch. Morgan Riley hasn't really been particularly good in the first half. I think getting that goal right ahead of the break, maybe that gives him confidence going into the second half. He had the injury to TJ Brody, which, they powered through. So I think this team actually is probably positioned to have a better second half than a first half. And that's saying something considering that, again, they're a top five team in the NHL. And that's not just when you look at the underlying numbers, but also, or not just to say in the standings, but also you look at the underlying numbers. And they deservedly are a top five team. So I feel pretty good about them. Health is obviously going to be the main one there, and now you got this Matt Murray ankle injury, which who knows where that's going to lead to. I guess is what I'll say about that. But Samsonov has come in and pretty well steadied the ship, and he's gained trust, I would say, of Leafs Nation. So they're not. It could have been a lot worse of a first half, let's say. So I think that the fact that they made it through as a top five team, second half might even be better.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up Matt Murray. I took some heat, I think it was last week, and I always take heat on social media, but I sort of said it was like an act, this whole Matt Murray thing, knowing what I know about, the player and the body of work the last couple years specifically. Maybe
Yeah.
I should have phrased it a bit differently, but I think from the Leafs perspective, you have to be a tad concerned. Are you concerned with the goaltending situation? Obviously, Samsonov's had a fantastic season, but I just think the guy behind him right now is just so unreliable. Do you really want to get to game one with that tandem?
Yeah, that's the big question that I think the Leafs are probably going to have to figure out the next few weeks. How much can you trust that Matt Murray will be healthy and ready to go if his name is called in the playoffs at some point? And like, I'm not one that believes that we'll see a tandem come playoff time. I think that they'll
Yeah.
battle it out, and whoever is anointed as the number one for game one, I mean, that'll be his net to lose at that point. And at this point, I guess it's got to be Ilya Samsonov. But you never know what could happen, right? Like whether it's an injury or performance issues. Like there's a reason why both of these guys were let go by their teams last year. Like just flat out, their teams did not want them. You know, so I think that there's always going to be question marks there. So is there concern? Yeah, I would say there is. Like I don't have the most trust in the goaltending situation, but I will say that Samsonov, I think at least is starting to earn trust of a lot of Leaf fans. I'm sure even you could say that you're in a much better spot headspace when he's in net compared to
Hmm.
Matt Murray, and definitely more so today than he was maybe of day one of training camp.
Your level of concern, how many shots at Grappa would that be?
Ooh, man. For maybe not too many. Like probably go solid like yeah, maybe 4 shots of grappa, 4 shots
Yeah,
down
yeah.
the gullet. Maybe that's not too
Yeah,
bad.
yeah.
I've
Yeah, I
had
could see
many
that.
many weddings where there was far more that have been taken than that. So
Absolutely seasoned vet, the limoncello flowing as well, sure, at weddings. So I
oh
check out the podcast routinely as well. I guested with you guys, the Italian Stallions themselves, but you recently talked, I think it was yesterday's show, about what the Leafs should prioritize at the trade deadline. What say you? We're closing in on March 3rd, obviously, and the next couple weeks should be very, very fascinating from the Maple Leafs perspective.
yeah, I've honestly I'm the biggest flip flopper on this one. Like it seems like week by week I'm changing my mind here. I'm starting to lean back towards a defenseman, and I heard Jay talking about this also on your show or just moments ago in the three
Yeah.
heads. Like I'm starting to also get back to thinking they might need just the different elements and go and get themselves whether it's a top four physical guy. I know Jake McCabe is a name that's been tossed out there. Gavrikov, obviously. I kind of like the idea of maybe a Connor Murphy also out of Chicago as a potential. He's got some term left. I think that he's a guy that could play some top 4 minutes. Or maybe even you go and you just try and get a depth guy like a Luke Shen potentially. So there's a couple
Yeah.
of I guess, avenues that the Leafs could go to upgrade their D. But I think there's a couple upgrades that you can make at forward too. And I don't necessarily think the Maple Leafs need to make a big splash and go and get a Timo Meyer or a Patrick Kane. I think I'd prefer more depth options, B level options, whether that's an Ivan Barbashev. Nick Bonino is a name that I've brought up a couple of times. I think he could come in
Hmm.
and be a pretty solid bottom six player. He has that winning pedigree with the Penguins a couple of years ago, and he could help this penalty kill, which to me is like a low key concern. Like right now, the penalty
Hmm.
kill I think is hovering under 80%, like pretty much right in the midway mark. I think they're 16th ranked in the league, and last year they were the third best penalty kill, and they've lost a couple of players that were part of that PK. So I think if they could get some dudes who can go in and help there, like a Nick Bonino, some other fourth line players, third liners, I think that could help with this team as well. Nick Bukestad is another name that I've brought up as a potential option too.
I think Florida's a prime example of maybe it's not so smart to blow your brains out. Even Columbus a couple years ago, it just really doesn't get you anywhere. And then conversely, you look at some of these teams, earlier on I brought up Nick Paul and Brandon Hagel, and you
Yeah.
talk about teams the last couple years who have, Arturi Lekkinen last year, like you bring in these complementary pieces like these Swiss Army knives, more Cali Yarncroaks, if you ask me, I think make more sense than going for the jugular, going all in on a Patrick Kane if he wants to come here, a Tarasenko and O'Reilly, guys who are really, really good at cost. Like I think that makes more sense in the grand scheme of things. Do you?
I completely agree. And I was chatting with oh wow, I'm gonna blank on the play by play gentleman in Boston. I can't believe I'm blanking on his name, but we had him on Leafs
Yeah.
Lunch, and then we were talking off air afterwards, and we asked him, did you expect this out of Boston? Like, why are they so good this season? And his answer was, well, because they beefed up the peripherals, right? Like they had the Marchands, the Bergerons, Pasternak, and you can go down defensively, and Lindholm was already there, McAvoy was there, Taylor Hall. So they already had the stars. You look at the Maple Leafs, same way, right? Like they've got their core four, their big four. You can add Riley in there as a fifth, maybe even TJ
Yeah.
Brody. But what the Boston Bruins did and why this year they've had so much more success is they've added those secondary and tertiary pieces, right? I mean, David Krejci helped, obviously, coming back into the fold, but that just pushed guys down a little bit. Now you've got a guy like Coyle, who's instead of being a second line center, is now the team's third line center. Instead of having Nick Foligno in your top six, now he's in your bottom six. And just getting everybody incrementally better by pushing guys down the lineup. So if the Leafs could do that, just get their bottom six guys just a little bit better than what they've got cooking right now, I think that could go a long way. And we know that there's a collision at some point with either the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Boston
Hmm.
Bruins, and the name of their game is depth. And I think right now the Leafs maybe lack a little bit of depth when it comes to those secondary and tertiary guys, and that's where I think maybe the Maple Leafs could focus on come the deadline.
It's funny. Everybody likes to talk about the postseason and what does this team in ultimately. It's never really been the goaltending or the defense. It's been the big boys drying up when it matters most. Like I vividly remember that
Yeah.
Columbus series. I remember the Montreal series, the Tampa series, and that's my
Well, what Marner
fascination. I
went
don't
like Marner
exactly.
went like 18 straight games without a goal. Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's what we talk about.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think you can never have enough depth. So certainly I'm along the same notes as you. You do a bang up job, dude. Before I let you go, I'm not a big football guy, but you always got some tremendous information, as you guys say on the show. Who's your Super Bowl pick?
Uh, all right. Well, so I've been going back and forth a little bit here. I've been going back and forth, but ultimately, hopefully, Luke and Hayes aren't listening right now, so they don't jack my material here. But I think I'm leaning with the Eagles, man. I just, I think that team. There's not a lot of holes there. They're a really deep club, and I still am a little bit concerned with the injuries going on the Chiefs side of things, particularly their offense. I mean, a high ankle sprain, that's like a 4 to 6 week injury, and 3 weeks later he's playing against the top defense in Patrick
Yeah.
Mahomes. That's going to be tough. There's not. I think McCole Hardman's already out, and Juju and Kadarius Toney are considered they're going to play, but they're pretty banged up themselves. So who's going to throw the ball to? Kelsey had back issue last week and was, a game time decision. Like they're all going to play, but how effective can they be? They're clearly not 100%. So I think that the Eagles are going to take this one.
It's funny you say that because I was in Florida at All Star Weekend talking to a couple buddies who are big football fans, and I'm like, I suffered a high ankle sprain playing beer league hockey, and I literally couldn't walk properly for like 6 months. Now, granted, this is the NFL; they have the best doctors on earth. Don't
Yeah.
get me wrong, but for Mahomes to come back after like a week in practice, dude, I was in bed for at least a month with crutches and the whole shebang.
That's because you're
So
soft, Nick. It's because you're
yeah, pretty
soft.
much, Mike. Pretty much. You are not, man. I appreciate your time. I know you got a show in about 35 or so, so appreciate it. Thanks for doing this, bud.
Yeah, man. Anytime, pal.